Hello, everyone. I am Joshua Friedman, news editor at Rappaport. Welcome to our latest webinar, the third and final in a series of webinars titled Fast Tracking the Future, brought to you by Sarine Technologies. I urge you to catch up on the previous two episodes on the Rappaport Group YouTube page. Sarine provides technology that has changed the diamond industry from manufacturing equipment to artificial intelligence. It set up the Sarine Technology Lab, the world's first automated artificial intelligence-based diamond grading lab, and has pioneered automated grading through its e-grading service, which enables diamond manufacturers to carry out third-party grading in-house using machine learning. Here's a short video from Sarine.
Once upon a time, in a faraway place, there lived a diamond store owner. One day, he discovered his stock of diamonds was running low, so he called his supplier and ordered diamonds with specific characteristics. So the supplier sent the diamonds for grading to a lab far, far away. And here, my dear, is where our tale goes a little tear-shaped. Only 80% of the graded diamonds came back with the expected grading. Do you understand that I am going to lose sales to my competitor next door? The owner yelled at his supplier. Then, out of the blue, a little fairy appeared and asked, "Why do you do it this way?" "Because I always have," replied the store owner. The fairy whispered to him, "My sincere condolences. Move to Sarine Grading. You can get a wider supply base, diamonds you need exactly when you need them." And if you ask me what became of the diamond labs, well, my dear, that is a story for another day. Sarine e-grading. It's no fairy tale. It's diamond grading reimagined.
This brings us to the topic of this webinar, automated grading and the AI revolution. We're going to explore the key issues around this. What is automated grading and how can the trade benefit from it? What are its shortcomings? Is the industry ready for it? And to what extent will it transform the way the industry operates, from mining to retail? Thanks everyone for joining us. I would like to start by welcoming our panelists. David Block has been CEO of Sarine Technologies since 2017 and has played an instrumental role in the initiation, development, and introduction of many of Sarine's innovations. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks, Joshua.
Our second guest is Nitin Kumar Jadha, Chief Manufacturing Officer at KGK, the international diamond manufacturer. Based in Surat, India, Nitin has almost 30 years experience in diamond manufacturing. We are also joined by Pritesh Patel. Pritesh has many years of experience in senior leadership positions related to information technology. He is Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at the Gemological Institute of America, the GIA, which is also deeply involved in automated grading. Pritesh, thank you for joining us from California at this early hour.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
And last but not least, Andrew Rickard, Vice President of Operations at RDI Diamonds, a US-based diamond wholesaler. Andrew has spoken at numerous industry events, is a frequent contributor to trade magazines, and is a board member for the Jewelers Board of Trade, the JBT. Andrew, you've appeared many times in Rappaport magazine and on our website, diamonds.net, and I thank you, Andrew, for being on this panel today.
Thank you, Joshua. Appreciate being here.
So we will take selected questions in the last 15 minutes. So if anyone has any questions, please post them in the Q&A section on the Zoom app. Let's start off though by ensuring we know what we're talking about. So David, what is automated grading?
So maybe try to put it very simply. Automated grading is basically grading that is done through technology rather than a manual process of using people to grade diamonds. Different technologies grade different aspects of the diamond: color, clarity, fluorescence, symmetry, and so forth. And the way that the technology has developed is through learning in the same way that a person basically learns how to grade, through artificial intelligence, basically providing the technology a huge amount of data and teaching the technology how to grade the diamonds. The big difference of a person grading the diamonds and technology is in the end the consistency. A system will do the same action again and again, whereas human beings, whether we're tired, whether we're too hot, too cold, maybe our mood impacts our ability to grade. So we're human being, we're not as consistent as technology. So the technology basically mimics the methodology of grading done by people, but in a very much more accurate and consistent way.
Thank you for that explanation, David. Nitin, you've steered KGK through some major changes in the industry, but this is quite a big one. Does the manufacturing industry want this?
Yes. I mean, to be very simple, it is yes. We need something which is automated, and it's if you see the evaluation as well, right from the start to the end of this diamond industry, wherever this technology has come in, there's a new evolution which has come in, and probably people have improved their quality processes in it. By the e-grading also, when it becomes more specific, when you grade a stone in your in-house itself, so your decision power improves over there. So I see a wider benefits coming in the future once this is, established with everyone in the manufacturing unit.
Thank you. And Pritesh, the GIA has also been piloting automated grading, especially for clarity. Can you tell us what the GIA sees as the role of automated grading in the long run?
Sure. Good morning and good to be here, Joshua. So I think GIA has been playing an instrumental role in automated grading for decades. And actually, in 1940s, when the first colorimeter was introduced, and over a period of time, there's a lot of different generations of the technologies been introduced in the grading process. And we're continuously investing a lot of research and development of tools and technologies to grade that part. So it's been part of our fabric for decades. There's an important role technology plays along with the human, and I think David explained it pretty well how the automation in grading will work. One of the things that is so important to get that consistency in grading, there's a human subjectivity sometimes comes up, but there's a part that requires getting the right standard, right data provided to the AI so that it can produce a right consistency. Because you don't want consistency that is not built on the fundamental, right? So I think this has been GIA's role in developing these technologies to use our decades of our standard deep understanding of that, millions and millions, rivers of diamonds that flows through GIA, adding that into the AI part so that the knowledge can be transferred to the artificial intelligence and it can work with us. And one other aspect of when we talk about the automation and the role of the technology in automation, we will be able to do 4 C's of automation. I think we will relatively easily in next few decades because technology has evolved and continues to evolve. The key question in grading when it comes in is a consumer trust. That's why that requires that consumer trust in there. And part of the consumer trust is also ensuring that they are getting the right information and the diamond they're buying is natural versus laboratory grown. And that treatment detection is can be automated as we know is today. So while we can only focus on 4 C's automation, the grading is beyond that. So I guess those are some of the topics that GI has been working with us for many, many, many years and decades to ensure that we bring the technology, to bring the efficiency, but they protect the consumer trust at the retail and at the consumer level.
Thank you, Pritesh. One of the things that you mentioned there that I'm sure we're going to talk about more today is the consistency aspect. But before that, I wanted to ask Andrew. You've I know you've already been using artificial intelligence and AI grading for various purposes for your business. Can you explain to us how have you benefited from it so far?
Yeah, thank you, Joshua, and I appreciate being here as well. What RDI is doing is we have some partners in the AI space, and we have launched a brand of diamonds called Rare and Forever. And within that brand of diamonds, we are utilizing AI grading for a more consistent and a more accurate product for the end consumer. Pritesh talks about the need for the consumer to buy in. And that's really where it came to RDI and why we made the decision we made. The feedback from our customers, the retail jeweler, was there's frustrations with kind of the current state of grading. There's frustrations with the consistencies of grading. There's frustrations with what's represented online as it relates to similar grades. That all creates confusion. I think based on where we were today, looking back, it's changed, right? There is a wider range, I think, within grading today than there has been maybe in history since the grading standards were established by GIA and AGS and players like that in the grading field. And I just think there's such a wide range today of inconsistency that there's a need and a desire from not just the consumer, but certainly the retail partners to say, we want a more consistent product. We want a situation where when you send us a diamond, the diamond matches the document. And I think in a lot of circumstances today, that's not happening. So that's really why, Joshua, we expanded into that space and see it with a bright future. And we're seeing tremendous growth with our brand Rare and Forever as a result of the consistency that we're able to deliver.
Right. So Pritesh at the GIA, how much more consistent is this potentially than traditional grading?
So I think the consistency has continuously improving through many decades of investment, and I think Andrew's talk about the inconsistency at retail and the gap is widening. Actually, on contrary, we're seeing the gap is shrinking in many of the cases, especially when you look at it in terms of the volume of the diamonds that goes through in a grading, especially at GIA. When we look at those numbers and we look at those information very, very carefully, right? And looking at versus our standards, our master stones, and many of the things of decades of the standards that we've been working with it and measuring that information between all of our 11 labs around the world with different people and things. And when we look at that and compare it with obviously technology, our humans are pretty good, but our technology is even getting better, very, very sharp in a lot of things. And the key part is in there is we're giving the standard information and millions of data to let it learn over a period of time with the breadth and depth of the information. So technology is an advancement of learning at a very, very high pace that it's harder for a human to learn at some point. But being said that, it's a combination of what human can do versus what technologies can do. So I think there's a good combination of both of those things that we do it, but we actually see the consistency in both color, clarity, cut, and all of our grades continue to improve.
Pritesh, do you see this as being something that would focus more on the volume goods rather than the large, high-value items?
I think the technology could be used across the breadth of all of the diamonds. Being said that, I think there is a space for smaller goods and stuff where it requires a high volume of things at very high efficiency of the speed. There will be a more usage of technology. But we intend to use the technology in all different sizes and stuff. Being said that, in certain size and categories, there's human element is still very much required, right? Technology is not at the stage yet where you can completely rely 100% on it. I mean, there is different components, for example, polish and many other things are very difficult to automate yet. While we have made a significant progress, there's some work to be done in some of those areas. So I do see there's a space in some smaller, less valuable goods that is going to be more prevalent. But for efficiency standpoint, you could use it across all of the different variations and shapes and sizes.
Thank you, Andrew. What's your view on this issue?
Well, I think I just want to clarify a point. And Pritesh, you talk about things tightening at the lab level. Here's what I would say that exists certainly here in the States, and that I hear when I talk to my retail partners. I did a search yesterday on a very prominent online selling source, and I ran just 1 carat, so 1 to 109 GSI ones, all graded by a prominent laboratory. You know it well, Pritesh. And the price range literally on these 928 1 carat GSI ones, so all the same, was $4,700 to just under 11. That is a massive difference. And so that's what I'm talking about when I say there is a broadening gap from, let's say, accuracy to less accurate. And so that's really how I look at the need for AI, and what AI can do is to provide more accuracy, more consistency, and let's shrink that standard deviation. So when someone sees GSI-1, there's a higher level of confidence in what they're actually getting. Now, and I know there's a million variables as to why that price difference exists, but a significant number of them are absolutely within the scenario that's not as accurately graded as it should have been. And so that's where, again, we see the need. Our retailers are asking us for that, and the consumers are responding because we can answer a lot of those questions away if we provide a more consistent and accurate document.
David at Sarine, how's this developing at the moment?
So maybe I'll try and relate both to Pritesh's reply as well as to Andrew's. So first of all, regarding consistency, I will give a much more absolute answer. Technology is way more consistent than manual grading. In fact, I'm so sure about that, I'm willing to challenge any entity or any grading lab to compare manual grading to technology. So there's a dramatic difference in terms of consistency. Technology is consistent. Manual grading is as consistent as the training of the graders are and the capabilities and processes within the lab, but it's not entirely consistent, just as Andrew mentioned. So technology, in terms of consistency, is way beyond anything that can be physically done manually. Going on to what Andrew said, in addition to the basic 4 Cs, there's a lot of different data points that are considered when trading diamonds that are not necessarily based only on the 4 Cs. So people talk about tinges of colors, you talk about milkiness, you talk about black spots under the table. There's a lot of different criteria that are used within the trade of diamonds within the industry. And that's another one of the parameters that impact that range that Andrew talked about in terms of pricing. When you talk about technology, you can start now including evaluation of those parameters, which becomes very, very difficult doing in a manual process because it becomes time consuming and very complex doing that manually. Whereas with technology, you can start adding additional parameters and really narrow down what goods you're looking for and how to achieve them, just basically like the messaging in the movie in the beginning of the webinar. So those are 2 aspects that you need to consider. One, there is a very much higher level of consistency with technology. And as I said, I'm opening up a challenge to any grading lab in the world to challenge us with that. We can check it by a third party. And second is looking at the additional parameters that today are very difficult to impossible to include as part of the grading process when doing that manually.
Pritesh, we interviewed your CEO, Susan Jacques, about, I think, a year ago on this very issue. And one of the important points that she raised was that throughout the history of gemology, of diamond grading, there have always been things that humans have spotted that machines would have missed, whether it's HPHT treatments and things like that. Do you see that as an important aspect of human grading that would be lost if everything became automated?
Yeah, I think so. There's a couple of points, and I'll answer a question, Joshua. But let me just comment to what David was talking about. I actually agree with you that there is the technology will do more consistency in the grading part, because I think once you train the AI, it has that, and it has an ability to be more consistent, and rather than removing some of the subjectivity of that. Being said that, let me just introduce, many of you might have heard this subject called AI bias, and many of us have heard about the AI bias. And what things is that what you train, what data you feed, what it does, it learns and it's developed based on that. So it's a fundamentally based on what information you provide and you teach, just like what you do to the human, right? You're providing certain information, how you educate, and there it applies in the AI space. So what our focus has been at GIA has been, let's train the AI to the best of the ability of the standards that was established decades ago by GIA. And then based on that, how do we get a lot of variation of information that we provide? Everything that David talked about, we see all of those through rivers of diamonds that flows through GIA. We see all the variations and depth and all that. And that has been taught to our AI to build it. So when we talk about consistency, we're talking about right consistency. You don't want a consistency where you have built it at AI based on a lot of variations or the part that Andrew talked about, which is not a problem of really, in a way, it's a grading issue. It's more about the overall integrity issue in the supply chain and how that information gets presented to the retailer and to the consumer. And that's where GIA's role comes in. And we are focusing on our consumer protection and providing the best information possible through the use of technology. Yeah, we want to continuously improve, provide consistent information and all of that. Going back to answering your question, Joshua, what Susan talked about, I think Susan had a really good point about it, because we can bring a technologies in 4Cs area. But I think the core part of the grading laboratory and consumer protection is a treatment detection. And today we see more sophisticated treatment than ever. And what GI has done is invested millions and millions of dollars in learning and staying ahead of what of this. And why that is important, one is obviously protect consumer, but also protect the industry and the trust that consumer has with that. And if we are not focusing on that, if we are not providing that information to consumers so they have that trust, it will be lost. And today, that part of the grading cannot be automated, because those technologies evolve so fast that AI or many of the things because there's a treatment to stop detecting the treatment. So what we are dealing with is a human element that only human can verify and things. And that's a core part of the grading beyond just AI and other things we talked about. So can that be automated in the future? Sure, maybe over a period of time, the technology evolve and we will be able to do it. And we actually working on many of the things in there. Our researchers are tremendous in this area, best in the world. And so I think we feel comfortable we'll be able to do. But today, if we just skip all of that and says we want to grade that at the retail counter or in the factories and stuff, we would miss that part, which will be the detrimental to many of the businesses and industry. And for sure, from GI perspective, we don't want consumers to go through that when they're making those decisions.
Thank you. Just a reminder to those who are listening and watching, if you have any questions, we will deal with them in the last 15 minutes, but please post the questions in the Q&A section and not in the chat. Nitin, as a manufacturer, would you feel more comfortable selling a diamond that's been graded by a human, or a diamond that's been graded by an algorithm?
I think AI would be a better option, because while the manufacturing aspect is happening, there are around 96 steps where one single diamond has to move one by one and then come to a finished product. And out of the 96 steps, probably 60 steps are where the machines are involved, the human psychology is involved, human decisions are involved. So if there's an AI over there at the end where it determines that this is SI1 or SI2, and that transformation happens within the factory, the decision level right from the start of planning of a stone to end it becomes more accurate. So the possibility of losing money over there becomes less. Because when we plan a stone on an original, when the initiation of the planning starts and the certification comes in, there's a difference of around 30-40% of the goods which have been identified as X color or X clarity. So that's kind of difference which happens when the human estimates at the initial stage and the certification comes. So if an AI is there, so probably those AI technology will transfer all those informations to a planning machine, which can give you more accurate data, more accuracy on it, and probably the planning would be more accurate. Now, coming up to the second point, there are orders. Now, orders are very specific when it comes to a retailer, when it comes to a jewelry manufacturer, there are too many specific orders which come in. So if this AI is visible and it is transparent to the manufacturing technology, probably those orders will be more smooth and more specific when they are being delivered. It means that, okay, thinking SI1 to be supplied, you won't be in a surprise at the end, okay, I missed 30% of it, I missed 40% of it. With the help of AI, probably there might be 5-10% of missing power. So because of that, the investment in the diamonds will be also less. So with less investment, you'll be able to supply to the customer the maximum output you need. So I think AI is important, and it's going to give us a good revolution on the manufacturing part as well.
That's a very interesting aspect, the sort of reverse engineering aspect of how this would impact the market. I think there's another issue I wanted to bring up, Nitin, which is, as we know, that the diamond industry gets used to a certain way of doing things, whether it's a site system or whatever it is. So one way that the industry works is that you polish a diamond, you send it to a lab somewhere else, and everything's built around that. So my question, Nitin, is how would this, with a transformation like this, how would this affect your workflow? Would you have to make major changes to how a company like yours operates in order to adapt to automated grading?
I don't think there is a bigger challenge while adopting an automatic grading. If it is done in-house, and if it is in the place where the manufacturing is happening, probably the working cycle will improve drastically. And it's basically, we've experienced few of the automated grading systems which are very automatic. It's not manual dependent. Of course, the accuracy level is improving on it as well with the intelligence which is coming inside, but it's going to make a huge benefit if it is there in your in-house factory or in-house place where you're working.
Right. David, what's your view on this?
So continuing with what Nitin started, I think the biggest revolution of automated grading is not necessarily in the consistency or accuracy, which we discussed earlier in the discussion. It's in the ability to transfer that technology closer to the source and really change the way grading is done by making it dramatically more efficient, both in terms of cost and in terms of cycle time. So we will start seeing later this year technology being placed at the end of the manufacturing cycle, where today there are manual grading departments that will be starting to be replaced with technology. And already at that point, you will be able to scan the diamonds for the large majority of the grading parameters, know what the results will be without having to send them to a grading lab. So I think the shift of grading that will save cycle times that today are 1 month, 1.5 months, sometimes longer, shipping expensive, insurance, and so on, all the overheads that are involved, cost of money, is going to really revolutionize how grading is done. It's not just the consistency and the accuracy of the grading, but think of it as the shift from the blockbuster days to the Netflix days. That's how we look at it. That's the revolution that we're looking at.
Andrew, do you think diamond grading at the retailer itself is a realistic proposition?
I'm not sure the retailer is interested in going down that path. I mean, I think that they all, a good bridal jewelry store is already doing grading. If I send something to them, they're evaluating it. They want to make sure that it's accurate. If they feel it isn't, we certainly get a phone call back. So, I mean, I think that's where there's checking that's done, right? That's an inspection aspect of an existing grade. Not doing a grade itself, but inspecting and does this product match this paperwork? And I think, good jewelers are doing that already and have been doing that for decades. That isn't changing, whether we're dealing with let's say a generic product or an AI graded product. That's relevant to both. And, I think that's going to be the case going forward, regardless. And what I would say, honestly, Joshua, is we've had to do that. So, we've gone down this AI path. And again, we have a couple of different partners we utilize for different things. We are constantly inspecting what we expect. There's comments I see around, well, what is the standard? Pritesh talked about the standard. We had to establish the standard with our partners. We had to go through and look at together thousands of diamonds, get the reports and say, no, this is the adherence we want. This is the standard that we want for our brand. Now, because that doesn't exist right now today in that arena, right? They can do whatever they want within the parameters that the machines are told to work within. So we had to set the parameters, and we are constantly, again, inspecting that and making sure that it meets our expectations. And over time, we're seeing they are so much more consistent. So I think David talked about that. Pritesh talked about that. Nitin mentioned that. You have to have an established standard, because what is the standard? Yes, no one knows it unless you agree with your partners and that are doing that grading. And we went through that exercise, and it was not easy, and it was a number of diamonds, and there had to be consensus, and that takes time to do. It definitely takes time to develop that.
Interesting. Moving on to the consumer side of it, there's obviously more demand these days for information about where a diamond came from, and that includes many aspects, including where it was mined, where it was manufactured, and occasionally where it was graded. Do you think the consumer, Andrew, do you think the consumer cares whether a diamond was graded by a human or by a machine, or is it really
I think the consumer cares that it's accurate at the end of the day. I think the consumer most cares that it's accurate, that again, the document matches the product. And if you can provide more consistency and show the consumer that, yeah, I think they're going to buy into that story. We're seeing them buy into that story. And I think that's just the consumer wants accuracy, because accuracy means value. It means I'm getting what I pay for. And that's ultimately what a consumer cares about. It's very confusing for most people. They've never looked at a diamond. They maybe have read a little bit about the 4 C's. That tells such a small story of the individual diamond itself. So if we can provide them more accuracy, more consistency, and adhering to a standard that many of us came up with in the business and recognized 20 years ago, that just doesn't necessarily, we don't recognize the same today, that's where the consumer is going to buy in.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. Particularly given that I would say that maybe the role of the gemologist is people have this image of a kind of a gemologist sitting over a stone looking at it. Maybe that's not so relevant to every consumer. I wanted to ask about this is really for Pritesh and David. I wanted to ask about how this will impact the grading industry, and particularly the people that work in the grading industry. And maybe starting with Pritesh, the introduction of automation would obviously mean that there'll be less need for human graders, but at the same time, people still need to work the technology and develop the technology. Do you think this would be a net gain in terms of the number of people that you would employ, or would people overall have to be sort of let go as a result of this?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and this is one of the things we always talk about and openly with all of our 3,000 employees around the worldwide, right? So we talk about there. I think directly answer that question. I think we have history. So when we introduced colorimeter, for example, in our automation, when we use that automation, we actually have increased our number of graders across the world for many years in there. So technology has never reduced the role of the humans. Actually, it allowed us to net gain and allows us to do more the diamonds we grade, more the consumer we protect. That's our way of looking at it, right? So I think part of that is we see the human's role along with the AI is going to continue in the grading space in the near future in there. I think I want to actually address one thing that Andrew just talked about, and I think we talked about consistency in many of the things and the role of AI. I think the issue we're talking about is there's two parts of the consistency. One, consistency within each individual grading lab, and then there's a consistency between different grading labs and things around it. So I think there are the two sets of problems we're talking about under one terminology, right? And I think what Andrew talks about is a crucial part in the consumer's mind. And I think that's what we have to, enforcing standards were established by GI in 1940s, and that has been there. That's the standard. How those standards get applied, that's where inconsistency comes into that part of it. So from GIS perspective, we always look at how to best apply those standards that going forward, every grading report, we put it out there in there. One of the example of how we have seen the improvement in there from the technology perspective with our cut grade. By putting our round brilliant cut grade out there, people are allowed us to manage and use that parameters to cut the grade. And so today we see 80-90% of the diamonds cut excellent in a way by providing that standard, that information to the manufacturing space allowed us to do that part, right? So I think there are ways that where we find an ability, but the standard cannot be established all over the place. There is a one standard that everybody else has to do. So I think that's the issue that we should be talking about. How do we get as an industry more consistency in the type of, so the consumer doesn't get confused, right? I think that's the challenge. And going back to the human role of the human, we think the role of the human, all of our graders, we will be able to continue to grow them, develop them, and utilize in many other areas where technology cannot be is not developed yet, and use all of our knowledge labor force.
Thank you, David. It seems to me that in terms of the employment issue, automated grading may well create more jobs overall, because it would create demand for highly skilled workers, but at the same time it might result in job losses for the lower skilled workers who've made a living out of physical diamond grading. Do you see that as a concern?
No, I don't necessarily agree with the statement, because and we can take many different examples, both within the diamond industry, with our technologies in the past, from outside the diamond industry, and I can give a number of different examples. But you see actually an enhancement of skills when providing people that have a really low level position or job, very repetitive. When they are introduced to technology, that actually enhances their skills. They become computer literate. They start working on advanced technology. So I see a change in jobs, graders shifting to be technology graders, not necessarily using their own grading skills, but how to operate, how to use the technology, how to interpret the technology. So the technology becomes an enhancement of skill to the current graders rather than replacing them. We saw the same process with diamond planning. Once upon a time, there used to be people that used to look with a loop on how to plan and manufacture a diamond. Today, you have hundreds of thousands. You've got over 100,000 people working in India doing this kind of task, working in high-tech factories with the most advanced technologies of hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars of worth of equipment that have really enhanced their skills way beyond what they used to be able to do manually. So I agree a lot with Pritesh. The jobs will change, they will evolve, but I think there will be a lot more people involved in the grading space in 5 years from now than there are today. So I believe that will be a lot due to technology. You'll see a lot more lower value, smaller diamonds graded because the technology enables that. It becomes much more cost effective to do so. So I see the grading space growing due to technology rather than shrinking.
Right, and Nitin, you're very enthusiastic about this. Do you think the rest of the diamond manufacturing industry is as keen on this as you are? And is there going to be difficulty sort of getting people behind it?
No, I think everybody would need it. So AI or automatic grading probably will help us. So first, I would like to address about the manpower, which can be a threat and cannot be a threat. So whenever there is a technology with specific identification, which has a specific, it goes more consistent or more clarity, then there's a production loss, because you'll have to go on the quality part. So over there, if we lose a person in the grading, we are going to increase a person on the planning part, because the accuracy over there will again increase further down. So losing a manpower won't be an issue as far as even manufacturing is concerned. So there'll be just a shift of process. Probably they will be shifting from grading to a planning part. Secondly, the need is 100% there for the industry, which is automated and which is consistent and which is giving you a knowledge which is more specific, which is more consistent. So I don't think industry will never say no or will be resistant for this. It will be more welcoming, and it is a need for today also.
Right. Just a question for Andrew. Is the era of human grading coming to an end, or do you think it will continue?
Yeah, I think it will continue, and I think that you're going to see growth of AI. I'm not sure that AI completely replaces human grading, and I think they exist in the future together, balanced. I really do. I think there'll be aspects of both human grading as well as technology grading. I think that there's a balance there. We have done that and found that even within this brand. We do a screen for the tinges and tints that David talked about. We do a BGM, a brown, green, milky, hazy screen on the Rare and Forever material. That's done some technology, some people. So, and it's done in different times in the process. So I don't think it's going to be a complete abandonment of utilization of people. There's an expertise there. There's an intelligence there. I don't think it completely goes away, but I think there's certain aspects of 4Cs grading that can be done with technology that's faster and more consistent. So I think it's going to be a balancing act, honestly, Joshua.
And Nitin, it seems that this is really, from the manufacturing perspective, this is really just one aspect and one area where automation is changing manufacturing, because it's becoming more common now for diamonds to be manufactured using AI. Do you see this as just kind of one piece in a larger picture?
Yes, I think if you look at AI, like rightly how David said on the planning part, we had planners who had planning stones for probably 200 carats, 300 carats. One single planner used to do that. And now, because of the technology which has come in, probably they have come down to 13 carats. So imagine the number of people who have increased on the planning part. So even in the AI, it's going to be the same thing related to consistency. I mean, there are many, many benefits in the manufacturing which we are going to come in the future times. If the AI is there, probably your planning on the stone is going to be more consistent. You will have the lesser stock. Probably your customer orders would be fed in at the initial stage itself. So I think on an overall basis, it's going to benefit a lot in AI. It's going to be a major difference which will come in for sure. It will be a bigger difference as far as manufacturing is concerned.
Pritesh, just a final question. We have quite a few questions in the Q&A to answer. So just before we get to that, you obviously deal with a great range of the industry. What do your customers say about this? Do your customers want you to go in the automation direction? Do they want you to focus on human grading? Do they want a bit of both? You're on mute at the moment, Pritesh.
Sorry about that. Our customers we hear from them what they want is obviously a faster service because the supply chain is shrinking. They're looking for that. They want consistency in grading, obviously, as we talked about, and they're looking for efficiency. So, right, that's what we hear from all of our customers in there. In order to do that, we're doing all three of them, right? So technology helps us to be more efficient. It reduces the time it requires to do it. The technology is just not grading in a factory. Obviously, that's one aspect of it, but there is a stuff that beyond, right, that we have to think about. So overall, how we help reduce the supply chain and bring that consistency, but also the more about the trust, right? I think end of the day, everything we do, our customer wants to sell more goods out to the consumer. And the only way that can happen is we as an industry can protect the trust of the consumer in every actions we take, right? And what we have to be careful about all of that is that it's not just become a technology discussion. It's about protecting a trust and providing most accurate information consistently across all the different parties within the supply chain. So I think those are the kind of things that we really need to be factoring in there and I think that's what benefit our customers, and that's what they want us to be focused more on it as well.
Thank you, Pritesh. Well, I'm very grateful for the conversation that we've had. Let's take a look at some of the questions that the viewers have submitted. The first one is from Joanna Park. The question is, what kind of volumes can be processed and with which margin of error? And let's start with David on that.
So by definition, technology is very easily scalable. That's one of the big advantages of technology. If you want to scale a grading lab from grading 1,000 diamonds a day or an hour or whatever the time period to 2,000, that is a difficult process. You need to train people, you need to ensure they're consistent. Whereas with systems and technologies, that scalability is very easy. So quantities and scalability is a very big advantage of technology. You won't end up in situations like we've had many times in the past decade of grading processes taking months due to the fact that there is a bottleneck in the pipeline. It's very easy to scale up technology, and there's really no limitation. With our technologies today, we process, not necessarily on the grading side only, but we process around about 100 million diamonds a year through our technologies. We don't have thousands of people globally. Sarine is about 500 people globally, yet we process 100 million diamonds a year. And that's enabled through technology that sits throughout the pipeline. Therefore, on the grading front, that I believe would be the same. The answer would be the same, that you'll be able to scale up quantities very quickly, scale down in times of slow markets without significant expenses attached to that. So there's only an advantage, I think, of technology when you're talking about scaling up or scaling down grading capabilities.
Thank you, David, for that answer. In the interest of fairness, I'm going to ask the next question to Pritesh. This was an anonymous one. What are the minimum stone size that you can currently grade using the capabilities that you have in AI grading?
We can pretty much go to any size of the stones with the AI capabilities in there currently, and we're going to continue to evolve and develop technologies and even very, very small stones. So right now our focus has been 0.15 to 15 and above type of thing, but we believe with our technology we can even go lower in some of those capabilities of that. We do have that as well. So I think overall I agree with a lot of points David made. I think the technology gives you the scalability and ramping up and down. The areas that are not developed yet with the technology, those will remain the bottleneck in the process part of it, like the treatment detection and many of the other things that has happened.
David, we have anonymous question here about loose diamonds versus mounting goods. What does
today? Today, basically, grading is done on loose diamonds. The reason being is because the process, as we described, will start immediately after the end of manufacturing, so the diamonds are loose at that point. Going forward, technologies most likely will develop for mounted goods, but we need to understand that mounted goods are more difficult to grade. There's the jewelry piece, the gold that interferes, whether it was the color, whether it was the access to looking at the diamond for clarity and other aspects. So I believe that just like today, most of the diamonds that are graded are loose diamonds. We'll see the technology grading the loose diamonds, but eventually I can foresee diamonds being graded on jewelry and mounted as well.
Okay, and one for Pritesh. This is about older cuts. An interesting question. How does AI grading address the cut and cut grades of older cuts as opposed to modern cuts?
Yeah, and I think AI, that the one we're building and training, I think it will address all of the different cuts, fancy shapes or the round brilliant and stuff. So I think it's going to be a breadth of all of that. The cuts gets understood by the AI. So I don't think that will be an issue that comes into it. Obviously, we have to obviously see the diamond in order to understand and all of that. So if I'm not sure what it means by older diamond, older cuts of that specifically, but as far as the technologies develop, it's going to cover the breadth of all of the different shapes and sizes.
In fact, that brings me to a question that I think would be worth asking, which is to both of you, David and Pritesh, where exactly does AI grading stand with regard to cut grades? I think this came up a little bit, but what technology is available to grade the quality of a cut?
So actually, cut grade grading or technology for grading cut has existed for nearly 30 years. Sarine was the first company to develop a system that grades cut. It's been available for nearly 30 years. So we don't see really any significant remaining challenges over there. Grading of cut is a very deterministic process, so you don't really need too much AI. A little bit in terms of shape recognition, understanding what the shape is automatically, you could use AI in terms of shape recognition. But in terms of cut grading, the standards are set. They're very deterministic. There's no interpretation. So we don't really see any significant challenge with grading cut and the need to use AI significantly going forward, other than for fancy shapes, which is a whole new arena.
Yeah, and I think to the point of the cut grading system, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the round brilliant cut was introduced a long time ago by standard. So I think it's a matter of establishing a standard, and I think the fancy cut grading system GI is working on, I think we feel very soon we'll be able to bring that to the market, and more standard will come in the fancy grading system as well. So it's more about standard and establishing. There's a lot of algorithm and things where has been built around that, and that has helped the industry tremendously in around brilliant. I think that's going to continue to happen in the space. We are already using an AI in what David talked about, the shape recognition and stuff. We have already built AI, and actually it's currently been parallel used with our human graders in our lab. So there's a use of the AI actually is happening in that area, and we anticipate there will be a tremendous progress will made with fancy shapes as well very shortly.
Okay, this is an interesting question from Charlie Hollander. I'm going to let whoever feels in the best position to answer this, or more than one of you, take this one. Assuming the automation works, do you think the trade can agree on the rules? So I assume this may agree on what should go in.
Yeah, I think that's the key part, as I brought up earlier, right? So, and this was the point Andrew was making. So I think that it comes down to a consistency. It's all about standard, right? So what standard has been established in there, and we as a GI believe that the standard that was established by GI decades ago, we're continue to follow that and ensuring that every report we produce are best to our ability meet those standards in there. I think that's what we all have to do it now. People cannot interpret standards differently. We can help as an industry to come and talk about there, and I think that's the role that we should have continuous discussion about. But at the end of the day, this problem will only get solved if everybody applies this consistent standard when those kind of grading that happens in human or in AI, right? So you don't want 5 different AIs to have 5 different standards that built on it, because otherwise you just move the problem from one place to the other. So I think that's going to be the key, and our understanding of our own standard is very deep, and I think that will be the key.
Right. Pritesh, do you think? I mean, the last thing the industry leads is yet another trade organization and another acronym. But do you think at some point there'll need to be some sort of universal standards organization for AI grading algorithms? I don't know what you call that, the AAI.
I don't know that we need another trade organization to do many of the things. I can't speak to it. I'm not sure that we need another body to tell us what. I think everybody knows what needs to happen in there. I think we need to have a lot more as a group, a discussion about it, and hold. I mean, I think to Andrew's point earlier, retailers shouldn't be talking about, well, I got to have more people to get explain this lab versus that lab. There should be a single application of those things in there. And I think technology might help in that area by opportunities of licensing and other things that could happen in perhaps of that, just like open standards that were developed for 4Cs and stuff. I think there's a lot of possibilities. I'm not sure having another organization to come up with that is a right answer at this point, but perhaps a broader group of people coming and having a further discussion could be a potential solution.
Right, thank you. I think this is a question I'm going to ask to David that came from an anonymous attendee. Is part of the function of a grading report a totally independent review from a recognized audit or certification body and someone not involved in manufacturing? So I think this is getting at, are there dangers of having grading taking place on site?
So it's an excellent question. I think there's maybe a little bit of a misunderstanding. The manufacturer is not grading the diamond. So when we look at e-grading, we're not talking about the manufacturer independently grading the diamond. The manufacturer has technology that scans the diamond for the raw data. That raw data goes up to the Sarine cloud. We analyze automatically that data and grade the diamond. So the grading is independent and is done by a third party. The only difference is that it's done with technology that sits close to the source rather than sitting in a grading lab. We already today grade diamonds in our grading labs in India and in Israel, but we see that the big advantage to the industry in order to reduce significantly costs in cycle times is moving that technology to the manufacturer. But under no circumstances is the manufacturer able to influence or decide upon the grading. So that's a very, very important point. The grading is independent, is third party, but is done at the source. So I hope that clarifies that issue, that there is no ability for the person doing the grading to actually influence the result.
Thank you. And again, I'm going to leave this to whoever wishes to respond, but this is an interesting question from Ludwig Steidman. Will AI be able to scan for irradiated diamonds? And I guess I could add to that.
Yeah,
all sorts of other things, lab grown and etc.
Yeah, I think I'll answer that question. I think today AI doesn't have those capabilities. Now, can that be developed in the future? Maybe too. And this was my point earlier. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are continuously developing some of these treatment and other things that happens on there. And to even hide the treatment, there's things in there. And so our focus has been in research and understanding those, and we experiment a lot of these things ahead of many of the people, so we can understand and protect that part. So we have developed a lot of tools and technology internally that we use in a lab. That so when the diamond leaves GI grading lab, we can assure that what they're getting in is an accurate information. So I think that area is going to remain challenging. I think there's a lot of discussion today happen about efficiency, doing in factory grading and other things in there. Those things that can happen with 4Cs, the part that you just asked question, today is not possible or feasible to do it in the manufacturing on other places in there because technology is not evolved, and the knowledge that requires with the people can only happen in the grading lab environment, right? With a sophisticated technology and tools, instrumentation be used. If this is what if we as an industry don't want to do it and put all that in manufacturing, I think that's a question we should ask ourselves. How far? So I think efficiency can come, but not at the cost of losing the trust, right? I think that's what we have to kind of focus on at that part. So today I think the technology still needs to work in that area.
Just so we're clear on that, how does what you're talking about differ from just the detection machines that are on the market?
Yeah, so the detection machines can do a laboratory grown or natural on a very simple basis in there. But when you're talking about the very sophisticated treatments that gets done to enhance the color or hide the different features of things, those are the things are not simple, that cannot be done with the technology that is available just out there in the marketplace today, right? That requires a sophisticated instrumentation and the knowledge of the people in there. That's the difference I'm referring to.
Joshua, maybe to add to that, I agree with Pritesh. There are certain quantities of goods that require more in-depth investigation when you talk about both treatments as well as lab-grown versus natural. But if you visit any grading lab, you'll see that the initial step is done on a very simple, very quick system that sorts the goods, go, no go. So you're going to get 95% of the goods having a very, very basic, simple check that provides 95% of the goods with a result. The 5% of the goods, I agree with Pritesh, will have to reach a more advanced analysis at a grading lab. But our objective is to process the very large quantity of goods that can be processed without sending them to a grading lab. That last remaining percentage, definitely at this point in time, will need to go to a grading lab in order to be graded and go through the much more advanced technologies that are needed in order to analyze them. But not all diamonds that go to a grading lab go through all in-depth processes. We need to understand that most of them don't.
Right. And
I-
sorry, Pritesh, carry on.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I agree with fully the statement. I think there, especially in the newer treatments that there has been established, there are so sophisticated that a lot of the diamonds, very majority of the diamonds, go through in-depth check of many of the times in there, and in certain categories more than others, right? So I think we underestimate the need of that, unfortunately. And I agree. I think most of the manufacturers and people in the industry do the right thing, but that's not the case across the board, right? And so I think what we have to do is continuously develop technologies to help us identify those things much faster, much sooner, so that every diamond doesn't have to go through, and we can bring more efficiency into that part. And I think what we think is that some of the things we see in our labs of those newer treatments, I don't think anybody in the industry can determine a lot of those things in there, right? So I think it requires a depth of research and knowledge and experimentation that happens. So I think again, use of technology and AI can help in this area, and I think we need to explore that continuously on that.
Thank you. We're running out of time, so I just want to ask two more questions that came in the Q&A. One of them was how this interacts with traceability technology. David and Pritesh, are you able to deal with that?
Sure. I think the traceability of the things is going to be critically important, right? And actually, the use of technology in that area will continue. I mean, there's a lot of platforms. A lot of the technologies are out there to trying to match rough to the polish and many of the things in there. Can diamond happen like in color stones? To the region matching there. I think diamond, I'm not sure. We and our research team continuously work on that. They're not sure that that's the answer yet in there, but perhaps some newer technology will evolve and it will do it. But I think there is a bigger role of technology to play in the traceability and use of the technology to provide the origin information of it. I'm not sure today we are there in diamond space with 100% certainty we can say for all of that today. But I think over a period of time, I do think it will evolve and it will be get much more efficient.
And David?
Yeah, so definitely, I think there's definitely a connection between the two. First of all, if you look at the consumer level, in the end, the consumer is looking for information about his polished diamond, where it came from, how it performs in terms of different parameters. So definitely there's a connection there at the consumer level. But maybe connecting back to what Nitin said, there's also connection going back in the pipeline. The more information you have about the outcome of the rough diamond, the better you can actually go back and track it and design it and plan it and manufacture it. Pritesh actually talked about that with cut grade. As cut grade became a more defined standard and tools were created to grade cut at a polish level, we were able to go back in the pipeline and enable the manufacturer to manufacture goods at a higher quality. That's, I think, one of the reasons today we see a lot more diamonds that are XXX. Why? Because the technology enables to manufacture according to a required standard. We actually even see the same process with clarity, with the introduction of our clarity scanning systems in the rough segment of the industry. We see a significant increase in VVS quality diamonds because it enables designing the diamond or planning it to a certain quality. So there's definitely an engagement between manufacturing and the final polish. And I think traceability definitely will play an important part. Just to give you an idea of how traceability connects up between the grading side and traceability, inclusions that existed in a rough diamond initially as a rough diamond that remain in a polished diamond are a kind of a birthmark that enables you to track a rough diamond. When grading that polished diamond, that information of those inclusions could be correlated back to the inclusions of the rough diamond and help with the aspect of traceability. So there's definitely very strong connection between both grading and traceability as you go back into the pipeline.
I want to ask a lot of questions about that, but we don't have time. So just
you're welcome to catch up afterwards.
Thanks. Just a final question. Someone was asking what data there is on statistically credible data there is on the difference between AI and human grading. I know this has come up a few times, but just remind us, do we have any numbers on that?
We'll share those numbers in there, but we do look at that very, very closely, and we look at across the spectrum of the data that we look at it. There's an in-depth analysis of what human grading, different location, different lab and stuff. So I think that will become a more and more transparent as it goes into and more development that happens in there. Overall, there's, as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a gap is narrowing in the consistency, at least within our labs, right? When we look at, well, I can only speak to that part. The gap, I think what Andrew was talking about between the labs, I think that's something we as industry needs to think about. But I think the numbers within our labs, when we look at it, our consistency is getting much narrower, in terms of getting better at this stage.
Great, thank you. Well, on that note, I'd like to thank all of our panelists, David, Nitin, Pritesh, and Andrew, for sharing their insights, and also to all of you for watching and listening. That completes the webinar and the series. This episode, like the previous two, will be available on the Rappaport YouTube page and on our website, diamonds.net. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you, Joshua.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Great.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.